But that was one of those incredible recruiting classes. I think in our 30-year recruiting history, maybe that was in our top 2 or 3 classes ever. So what ended up with Katie, which was certainly bad luck for her, is this class we recruited on top of her, and part of the reason we recruited that class is she wasn't getting it done. So a lot of times what happens in our recruiting is we bring all these kids in, and obviously, is Klingenberg in her class? Kling went through the roof with us. We knew she was going to be good. We didn't know she was going to be that good. So what happens when you recruit a kid is obviously there's an expectation. Well, some kids just surpass your expectation. Klingenberg was one that we knew she was going to be a good player, but my gosh, she's a lot better than we ever anticipated. And then some kids that aren't as good as you had hoped, then what you're doing is you're reshaping that next recruiting class. Because this class, not enough kids fought into the 19. So now what you're hoping in this next class is more of the kids can fight in. And so that paradigm changed based on what we saw that year. But fortunately, this class that came in right after more than made up for that thin class that Kling came in with.
Can you explain the recent kind of growth of the team in size and kind of how that happens with a college team, how you get to be so big, and maybe how you deal with that once it gets to a point where it's like too big?
Yeah, as I shared with you before, in the old days we were restricted in the number we could bring in. In the old days, the maximum number of out-of-state kids we could recruit, and by what I mean recruit, recommend to the admissions committee. Because to get in here as an out-of-state student is ridiculous. I mean, for the odds of a kid getting in without my help that can compete for us athletically is remote. I mean, if all the athletic teams at the University of North Carolina had to just compete with the out-of-state standards that we have, there wouldn't be an athletic team here that can compete at a national level. So what the university does for us is they have this talent category. And it's a category that's not just restricted to athletics. They bring in musicians this way. I think they might even bring in some actors and actresses. But basically they bring in a range of people that don't qualify to compete with the classic out-of-state academic profile, which is severe. And so they allow us a certain number of people that we can recommend to the committee. Now, these people we recommend certainly have to have the possibility, well, not possibility, they've got to be able to graduate. But they don't have to compete with that ridiculous out-of-state standard. So back in the days when we could recruit 4 out-of-state and 1 in-state kid, it was hard for us to get anywhere near the numbers that we needed, not just to have a competitive team in the fall, but the team in the spring would be so decimated because of obviously graduation losses, but also injury. There was, I think it was Yael's freshman year, we went to a game in Florida and had 9 healthy players, and we had to play 9v9. And this is one of those major events that some sponsor put a lot of money into, and all of a sudden we only show up with literally 9 players, not like 13 players and we played 9. We showed up with 9 players, and FSU had 16 players, and so there we are with our 9 against their 16. And then the year after Yael's freshman year, her sophomore year was the first year we were allowed to recruit more than 4. So with that memory in mind, I never wanted to go through another off-season like that ever again. So then we started bringing in larger classes, and it was something that Dick Bedore, our athletic director, had negotiated and lobbied for us for years, and it was something that has had a huge impact on our success. I genuinely feel that a part of our recent success has been the recruiting classes. For example, in Yael's sophomore year, I think that was the Tobin, Nikki. It was a massive class and massively talented. And that year we won a national championship. The only reason we won a national championship that year is because we no longer were restricted to recruiting 4 players. Because in that class we brought in, I'm just trying to think right now, but it was Ingen, Tobin, Nikki, Casey, Christy, yeah, the Hawk. So yeah, 6 players came in on that class from out of state that impacted in a significant way. And all of a sudden we're national champions. And so now we have a spring where we're not decimated, so that was good. And so what we've done ever since is we're trying to find our saturation point. And honestly, we haven't hit it yet. We're still trying to be able to find 19 kids that compete for us in a game. And then I was a little concerned because I've never had a team this large. And so I was a little concerned coming into last fall because our numbers were so big. And then all of a sudden, we're there in the preseason. I'm thinking this is going to be difficult to manage because we're going to have so many kids. And we didn't have enough. And part of the reason was we were just decimated with injuries. And it was incredible how many kids were hurt this past year. And so even though coming into the season I had this huge fear that our team was going to be too large, this last year, if we go from August to basically last month, is the best year we've ever had, in every respect. In terms of performance on the field, that team overachieved. In terms of chemistry, we've had a lot of great teams with great chemistry, but I am hard-pressed to say there's any team in our history that had the chemistry this team had in the fall. We won a championship against the run of play. I mean, I thought Notre Dame and UCLA, undefeated coming into the Final Four, had to be favorites, and I'm sure they were. And their talent was overwhelming. And I really feel like one of the reasons we won last fall was because of our chemistry. I think our kids loved each other. They loved playing for each other. And so this issue that I thought coming into the season with this large roster was dissolved in what I saw. And what I saw was almost a record number of injuries. I saw a collection of kids committed to basically the team. I saw remarkable chemistry, and then to cap that off, we went from having one of the best falls ever to probably the best spring ever. I'm talking about, I could argue that there were some other teams that had as good a chemistry in the fall and won championships in similar fashion. I don't think I can argue that any team in the spring had the kind of spring we had, where we're competing favorably with professional teams, where when you look at Klingenberg in January and you're looking at her in March, you see this huge jump. When you look at Tobin, who's got an Olympic gold medal, you look at her in January and look at her in April. She's a transformed player, getting 6 assists, 2 goals, and 4 halves in the ACC tournament. I mean, her game went to a different level. Casey Noguera continues to improve. When you look at Nikki Washington, Whitney, I mean, all these kids are all getting better and better. So I would say unquestionably the spring is the best ever. So now I'm looking at these numbers, and even though coming into last fall I was a little bit concerned, I don't have that same concern anymore.